Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first event in the new Food Impact Program webinar series. My name is Jeff Sebo, and I direct the Center for Environmental and Animal Protection at New York University. And I am very happy to be moderating and hosting this event alongside my colleague, Matthew Hayek. Matthew, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, I'm Matthew Hayek. I'm an associate professor at New York University's Department of Environmental Studies and also the inaugural program coordinator of NYU's new Food Impact Program.
Awesome. Yeah, the Center for Environmental and Animal Protection is a research center that examines important issues at the intersection of environmental and animal protection. And that broadly includes a focus for us on agriculture because of how it affects farmed animals, public health, the environment, and conservation because of how it affects wild animals and public health and the environment. And so the Food Impact Program is a brand new initiative launched earlier this calendar year that is going to do research and outreach and field building work related to the impacts of food systems and pathways towards the needed food system transformations. And this webinar series is going to be part of that, helping to facilitate conversations about the impacts of food and pathways towards reform. So thanks everybody for joining this inaugural event. And I do hope you can join us in future events too. I want to have a lot of great conversations over the next year and then beyond. So today we are going to kick off this webinar series with a fantastic first topic and speaker, a really important and urgent topic for reasons that will soon become clear. And so I can tell you a little bit about the format and then introduce the speaker and let him take it away. So this is going to be an approximately 75-minute conversation, and it will start with a brief presentation from Josh about the Save Our Bacon Act and current updates and next steps. And then there will be a lot of time for discussion. And Matthew is going to lead that discussion by asking some of his own questions, but then also weaving your questions and comments into the conversation as they come in. And so if you would like to ask a question, make a comment, engage in any other way, the way to do that is to look at the bottom of your screen for the Q&A tab and then add your questions or comments to the Q&A tab in particular. And then Matthew will pick those out and read them to Josh so that they can be a part of the conversation. And so you can go ahead and add those questions and comments at any time during the talk, during the conversation, throughout the event. Okay, with that in mind, it is my honor to introduce Josh Balk, the CEO of the Accountability Board, an organization that utilizes shareholder engagement to advance animal welfare with the world's largest corporations. At the Humane Society of the United States, he led the passage of a dozen state laws banning cages for egg-laying hens, mother pigs, and veal calves, including the historic California Prop 12, the strongest farm animal law in the world, which was obviously subject to many legal debates and challenges all the way up to the Supreme Court. Very noteworthy. He co-founded Eat Just, the maker of Just Egg. He also worked at Animal Outlook, where he conducted undercover investigations at chicken slaughterhouses and factory farms. And he is now leading the campaign to stop SOB, Save Our Bacon, from becoming federal law. So, Josh, thank you so much for being here. Whenever you feel ready, feel free to share your screen and take it away.
Jeff, Matthew, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen now, everybody. One second here. All right. How does that look, friends? Matthew, how does that look?
So far, so good. Looks good,
Great.
Josh.
Fantastic. All right, let's do this. Thank you, everybody, for attending this event today and hearing about this critical effort to stop what is probably the biggest threat to farm animals since the advent of factory farming. But let's take a step back to see, how did we get to where we're at now? Since 2002, we've been passing state laws across the United States. We passed a ballot measure in Florida in 2002 to ban gestation crates, 2006 in Arizona to ban gestation crates and veal crates. And then we passed laws every couple of years or so on those issues. However, while we are proud of the progress we made during that time, we knew we had to have a holy moly, massive transformational campaign to forever change how farm animals are raised in the United States. Yes, incremental progress is good, but we wanted to go faster and wage, instead of a cold war of things going slow to move things for animals, more of a hot war, a big campaign where there will be a winner and a loser. And if the winner advances, then forever our country has changed. And that's what California's Proposition 12 was. So what it would do if passed would ban the sale of eggs, pork, and veal from caged animals. Now, let me be clear. It would ban the production and the sale, no matter where the products are produced, from eggs, from chickens, pigs, and calves. With California being the most populous state in the country, with California being the world's fourth largest economy, we knew the impact would be massive. So it took about 500,000 signatures to get Prop 12 onto the ballot. We had thousands of volunteers up and down the state making phone calls, sending text messages, knocking on doors, holding rallies. I mean, look at this kid with his fist up. And we had some amazing advocates in that year, 2018, where we waged Prop 12. We had celebrities come out endorsing Proposition 12, encouraging everybody to vote yes on it. I personally, leading the campaign, was going up and down the state debating agribusiness on TV, radio, in front of newspaper editorial boards, where, as an example, LA Times encouraged its readers to vote yes on Proposition 12. We raised $13 million, the most money ever raised for a farm animal initiative in US, if not world history. And most of the funds had to go to placing advertisements so people would know what the issue is, see footage for the first time about how animals are raised for food, and encourage them, of course, to vote yes to ban these practices. Now, I'm going to show you a quick commercial. If you don't hear the audio, I'll just share what the narrator is saying. In short, the narrator is talking about how these calves, pigs, and chickens are confined in cages, and that we have a chance to vote yes to ban this practice for animal welfare, for food safety, saying how thousands of California veterinarians are in favor of Proposition 12. Yes on 12 was the message to prevent cruelty and, of course, food safety, which go hand in hand. At the end of the day, it was the animals, not animal agribusiness, that won with nearly 2/3 of the vote, ushering in the strongest law for farm animals the world has ever known. Now, did we stop with California's Prop 12? Of course not. What we then employed was the strategy where we said, listen, agribusiness in next state, you saw the outcome of Prop 12, got nearly 2/3 of the vote. You saw the resources we're able to bring to the table, the $13 million, and those philanthropists are ready to go again. By the way, you see the polling. We can do the same thing in your state. We are coming. However, we're also open to finding a compromise. And if we give you a couple more years to comply, will you endorse state legislation to do what California did, at least on eggs, and ensure that all eggs produced and sold in the state would be cage-free? Utilizing that strategy, we got the endorsement from egg producers in the states to say yes. We might not necessarily agree with the future that you're trying to pursue, but we understand, at least in our state, it is inevitable. So we will back legislation, endorse it, testify side by side with you, Josh, to get this done and get bipartisan support. That's the strategy we employed. Right after Prop 12, which passed in 2018, the very next year we passed cage-free egg laws in Washington, Oregon, and Michigan. 2020, in the middle of COVID, we passed a cage-free law in Colorado. In fact, the governor was so thrilled with this legislation, he signed it into law being surrounded by chickens running around him, and to celebrate, gave out vegan cupcakes to the reporters. We then went to Utah, Nevada, Massachusetts, Arizona. Now, nearly 25% of Americans live in states where it's illegal to sell eggs from caged chickens. This is a legislative landscape that many thought was not possible only a few years before Prop 12, and then it eventually became reality. Now, if we were all talking here today, about 10 years ago, the percentage of chickens who were outside of cages was about 10%. As of the end of last year, we reached nearly 50% of the egg industry being cage-free. At the end of this year, I think we're going to get over 50%. This likely is the greatest reduction of suffering ever in US history. This trajectory to get animals out of cages. Annually, it's about 160 million hens who are not in cages who otherwise would be caged. On the pork industry side, we've gotten the pork industry go from single digits, mother pigs out of these gestation crates, to now more than 40% of mother pigs in the US are not perpetually confined in cages. Also a tremendous advancement to reduce the suffering of animals. Now, not everyone is so thrilled with these advancements. The pork industry especially, and they have been pushing the Save Our Bacon Act. Now, what is the Save Our Bacon Act? In short, it's legislation federally in Congress that would wipe out farm animal laws all across the country. You know, they tried to stop them during the ballot measure. They failed. They tried to overturn them at the Supreme Court. They failed there as well. Now their last vestige of hope to overturn these laws is by their backers in Congress passing the Save Our Bacon Act. Hey, this is something they tried in the 2014 Farm Bill, led by someone named Steve King, who was most notorious for his love affair with Nazis, his support of dogfighting. He got in the House Farm Bill. At the time, it wasn't called Save Our Bacon. It was called the Steve King Amendment. Very humble guy, named it after himself. The Senate blocked it in 2014. We won. 2018, same thing. He got in the 2018 Farm Bill. The Senate blocked it again. This time, what has happened is the same exact cycle. The House of Representatives passed a Farm Bill a few months ago with Save Our Bacon in it. We had the votes to strip it with an amendment led by numerous Republicans, but Speaker Johnson, at the behest of the House Ag Committee chair named G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania, refused to allow a vote on the amendment, and thus the Farm Bill passed the House with Save Our Bacon in it. That was a terrible moment in our campaign. This brought a lot of fear that the Save Our Bacon could be reality. However, since that passage, there's been a rejuvenation of energy and support to oppose this existential threat to animals. And because of that, we've been able to bring this issue of Save Our Bacon to the highest levels of societal discourse. As a few examples, Ezra Klein wrote a major feature about Save Our Bacon in the New York Times. So did Nicholas Kristof. In terms of the influential community, those who are on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and TikTok, you know the power of influencers. And especially now in politics, where politicians want to look like it's the influencers who are looking to, rather than stuffy lobbyists in DC, we've gotten many of the most popular influencers in all of US social media to do features all about Save Our Bacon, including folks who have 1.5 million followers, 1.7 million followers. By the way, after I was on this show with I Am Politics Girl, she told me that 2 different senators said they watched it and thanked her for raising this issue to her audience. Folks like Brian Cohen with more than 5 million followers, David Pakman with 3 million followers. We have more than 10 million followers collectively with these social media influencers have seen now features all about Save Our Bacon. And this includes senators, House members, and staff members who have seen all of this buzz coming from a trickle up effect going on in the United States. We placed advertisements as well. $30 million going into advertisements in key states, all about Save Our Bacon. Now, let me be clear as I show you this commercial. As folks watching may know, the largest pork producer in the United States, the biggest beneficiary of Save Our Bacon in the United States, is Smithfield Foods, and it's owned by China. And what we have been making clear, especially to Republicans who claim to be strong against what they view as a threat, a national security threat from China on myriad issues, we're making it clear, wait a second, if you view China as a national security threat, why support legislation that would help the largest pork producer acting in the United States that is owned by China instead of helping American family farmers? This is accurate and strong messaging, especially for conservatives. And in this Congress, we cannot win with just Democrats. We can't. We have to be bipartisan in our opposition. So as you'll see here, this is a commercial that has aired nationally on Sean Hannity's program, Laura Ingram's program, and we have different variations of it playing all across the United States in different states. We're talking about the difference between family farms and factory farms, especially at Smithfield Foods, the biggest proponent of Save Our Bacon. And we're calling on, hey, which side is the senators on? And this campaign has gone agribusinesses notice. Every major agribusiness outlet has covered this campaign. The American Meat Producers Association, that is the family farming organization that is launching these campaigns, an organization that so many folks have supported to air these commercials. It's made up of family farmers who are doing it better, who don't believe in gestation crates, who don't believe in cages, and don't believe in overturning these laws. AgriPulse, which is what folks on Capitol Hill look to as a non-biased source, so to speak, on agribusiness, did major features all about this campaign. Now, you might be wondering, is this effective, this campaign against Save Our Bacon with his advertising effort to oppose it? Well, this is from Pork Magazine. And of course, Pork Magazine, not so non-biased, very biased towards the industrial pork industry, did a whole feature about this campaign to stop Save Our Bacon. And in it, the National Pork Producers Council president, Rob Redeman, issues an urgent appeal to producers across the country in response to the campaign, saying, show up and tell your story, people. Please, 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 I'm begging you. And this effort has wielded success in the Senate. 2 months ago, if we were here gathered and you said, hey, Josh, is Save Our Bacon going to be in the Senate Farm Bill draft? I would say guaranteed. And we're going to be in a lot of trouble if that's the case. Because of this campaign, just announced a few weeks ago, the Senate Farm Bill draft did not include Save Our Bacon. And that's because of all the pressure and societal discourse on this issue. Chuck Schumer, for the first time, has spoken out strongly against it, and to have the minority leader speak out saying that he's going to fight to keep Save Our Bacon out of the Farm Bill had a lot of traction to push Democrats to fight even harder. Now, the biggest win in this battle had to do with Senator Roger Marshall. Senator Roger Marshall is from Kansas. He was the lead sponsor of Save Our Bacon for years. The lead sponsor, not just someone who happened to co-sponsor it or happened to maybe vote for it. He was the lead voice, the lead champion of Save Our Bacon. And after a lot of effort going into Kansas to inform Kansas voters about who Save Our Bacon would help, big industrial producers, and who would hurt Kansas family farmers, to give Senator Marshall credit, he changed his position and said, listen, I'm no longer supporting Save Our Bacon. I don't want it in the Farm Bill. I'd rather focus on other things. Now, that was a massive blow to the pork industry who's been pushing Save Our Bacon. It is shocking that any senator who is a sponsor of legislation, who in the middle of the battle pulls support for it. As Politico reported about Senator Marshall, uh, who removed his name as a co-sponsor, the National Pork Producers Council, the Congressional Affairs staffer, said the National Pork Producers Council was, quote, disheartened to see Marshall remove his name from the bill, that the group can't compete with activist groups. Industrial pork producers are acknowledging to Politico for the first time they can't compete against us. And ultimately, as they said, we hope Congress continues to listen to the needs of producers. This, in their view, misinformation campaign has been running throughout the country and has been damaging. To be clear, they themselves are acknowledging that our campaign has been damaging to their interests. All the agribusiness press reported this massive news that their champion has reversed his position from agri-polls to successful farming, to meat and poultry, to national hog farmer, to fence post, which a great subtle end to this moment. They said that a pork producer said it was particularly frustrating. So friends, where we are at now is that the Senate is reconvening on Monday. And according to Senator Bozeman, who is the chair of the Senate Ag Committee, he's going to try to do a markup either in July or the first week of August in the Senate Ag Committee. The markup is when senators come together and they determine, hey, should we have any amendments to this bill? If so, put them forward and we vote on it. And then vote to move forward with the bill to the full Senate. That's what the markup is. His goal is to have it in July or first week of August. Then we go to the full Senate for a vote. If the full Senate passes a farm bill, it then goes down to what's called a conference committee, where the House and Senate ag leaders come together to work out their differences in a farm bill. And that's when we will determine the full fate of Save Our Bacon. Happy to answer any questions that you all have today. Thank you so much for having me. And let's go. Let's answer some questions.
All right, so I think that kicks it over to me. I haven't seen any questions pop up in the Q&A, but as a reminder, through the Q&A, you can submit your questions. And I'm not sure if those are necessarily like publicly available, but I'm gonna keep those in the queue, and until they kind of come in, I will ask some questions that I have here of my own, and then begin to trickle in some audience questions. So what I think I'll start with, especially because I think there's an additional attendee who had some questions about this, is just, could you say a little bit more about what state this is in? Is it defeated? Is it still a looming threat that could pop up at any moment? You clearly painted a picture where the bills have to go through both the Congress and the Senate and have duplicated language in both versions in order to pass. And it made it into the Congress, the House of Representatives side of the bill, but it was not present in the Senate side of the bill. So is it out of there for good? How does it come back into the picture?
It could come back. It could be a poltergeist and just not go away. Right now, we are in a good position in the Senate. If the Senate draft of the Farm Bill had Save Our Bacon in it, I'd be talking with you, Matthew, say, listen, we're in a tough position. We're going to have to find a way to strip it. We're going to try to find a way to get an amendment introduced in the full Senate. And then hopefully Majority Leader Thune would even allow an amendment. And then we'd have to lobby to ensure that enough senators would vote to pass the amendment and strip Save Our Bacon from the Farm Bill. So that would be a big task at hand. The fact that it is not in the draft is a very good position for us in the Senate. This poltergeist could come back in several ways. One is in this markup that we talked about earlier. A senator, particularly Chuck Grassley from Iowa or Joni Ernst from Iowa, could introduce it as an amendment to bring it back into the ag committee, say, hey, everybody, I want this in the farm bill. I'm introducing his amendment. Let's vote for it. Now, the good news is that if Senator Bozeman keeps his word saying, listen, I actually don't want this in the Senate Farm Bill, he should vote against it. If Senator Marshall keeps his word saying, listen, I don't want to be part of this anymore, he should vote against it. If those two folks vote against it, any amendment in the Farm Bill won't pass. The Republicans have one seat more than the Democrats. So if the Democrats stay aligned, which we are optimistic they will, then we'll be in a strong position. In the full Senate vote, they still might try to introduce an amendment again, just to show their pork industry benefactors that they are still fighting. So we'll have to fight the amendment in a full Senate vote potentially as well. Finally, if we actually get through the Senate and it passes a farm bill, they go to this conference committee, as you talked about, Matthew. And in this conference committee, the leaders are the Senate Ag Committee Chair, Bozeman, and the ranking Democrat, Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota. On the House side, is the Ag Committee Chair, G.T. Thompson, and the ranking Democrat on the Ag Committee, Angie Craig. Those are the four. And those are the four who are going to hash out the differences and to come to some agreement as to what does a compromise farm bill look like that will then have to go for another vote in this full House and the full Senate. In that conference committee, we got to make sure Save Our Bacon is not part of any agreement whatsoever. We have to make it toxic. We have to make it a red line issue for Democrats saying, listen, you won 60 votes in the Senate, don't include Save Our Bacon. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of Republicans that don't like it either. We want to make the case that if you want a farm bill passed, you put this in here, it's going to damage the potential for any farm bill to pass whatsoever.
Great, thanks for that. And with those details, the questions that I'm seeing all so far now reflect who can get involved, how to get involved, and where they can get involved. And I really want you to answer those questions, but let's do it at the end so that we can kind of end on a call to engagement. And I think for now it would be great to think about what this says about because we have some additional time here, like what this says about how we advocate for animal and environmental protection, which is what the Center Housing the Food Impact Program advocates for, how these issues align with one another, and sometimes, even including in the cases of places like the Kansas ads, they might clash with one another. And that's kind of what I would really like to get into for a little while here. And with that, I kind of wanted to ask the question, not to put you to the coals or anything, but just to say, what I find, and your reflections on a football happening here that I found was interesting, which is this idea of family farmers, right? That your campaigning and the pork producers are both holding up the family farmers as the people who are going to be impacted the worst by both sides of this outcome. And so I just kind of wanted to, instigate a little bit and ask, like, who's right here? Or just how you see this. If Save Our Bacon, which says that, or rather, if Save Our Bacon passes, laws like Prop 12 that reflect the purchase and consumption of goods get overturned. So Prop 12, is that good for smaller producers or bad for smaller producers? With eggs, for instance, half of the producers are producing caged eggs and half are producing cageless eggs. And the trick right now, the issue with this is that most farmers in the country are family farmers, but who contract with large corporations that set standards. And that's the kind of context that we're discussing here. So I would love to hear your reflections, Josh, like how are family and smaller and contract farmers hanging in the balance of all of this?
The good news is that we are accurate and the opposition is lying. And so that is a lot better position to be in when you're advocating Congress, though lying sometimes is effective, and that's why the opposition is strong. So the reason why we are accurate is that family farmers typically don't use the industrial practices like caging animals. it is not in their interest. If you have, as an example, if you have a couple hundred pigs on your property as a family farmer, there's no reason to confine them in a small cage and not market your products as pasture or organic or crate free when in most states you actually have to compete against industrial operations who can undercut you. So you have to demonstrate that your practices are better and people should choose your products over the standard conventional industrial products that are being made by giants such as Smithfield Foods. The reason why the industrial producers know that we're right and they're wrong is because in all of their messaging on Save Our Bacon, they literally never show gestation crates. Why is it? Why is it that the core issue that the pork industry has with these laws is wiping out crates? Why is it they don't even talk about the crates? They know because normal, ordinary people would see these crates and think, wait, this is horrible. This is not what family farmers do. Family farmers don't have giant warehouses with 10,000 pigs confined in crates. And so, what they try to attempt to do is to prop up a vision of family farmers that don't exist in reality, that somehow are going to be harmed by laws that have raised a bar to such an extent family farmers can finally compete against industrial producers. And so, when you have family farmers who now can compete against industrial producers. And Matthew, here's how. When Prop 12 says, listen, anyone can sell here, just don't use cages. When you're a family farmer who for so long had to compete against industrial producers, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is finally a level playing field I can compete in. I no longer am going to get undercut by industrial producers. That's why family farmers have been on our side from the beginning in this battle. And when it's industrial producers, they now can no longer undercut. So they're trying to wipe out this bar that has been set. And when this bar gets eliminated, if Save Our Bacon passes, then all of a sudden the undercutting begins. And those family farmers that have thrived in the California marketplace, finally the fourth largest economy, buying their products, what a gift to family farmers. These family farmers have testified publicly, they've said in the media, they will go bankrupt because this is their opportunity to finally thrive in an environment where, as you know, family farmers have just been going out of business for decades and decades on end. And I'll also bring up a point is that as numerous producers have said, there's a quote civil war going on in the pork industry. And the civil war, according to them, it's going on. It's the family farmers that sell pork to, in most states, whether it's to farmers markets, whether it's to natural food stores, or whether it's to grocery stores that are starting to shift away from the industrial confinement systems, it's those producers who are now up against the National Pork Producers Council. That is the big trade group that represents the industrial giants within the pork sector. So according to the family farmers themselves, the civil war is occurring, and they hate that industrial producers use the term family farmers to back their own arguments when they know the reality is the opposite.
Yeah, so this is all very interesting. And what I'm hearing is that like there's still this contention over who a family farmer is, what a family farmer counts as. And, I think that's all you know, uh, going to continue to be really contested, and that the companies themselves that are creating the contracts that have the techniques like the larger of the warehouses and the gestation crates where gestating and farrowing pigs can't even turn around, that creates certain externalities, right? An externality is anything that's not like a harm that's not being reflected in the price of the good itself. And that might be some environmental pollution for a very concentrated facility. That might also be a harm that a consumer doesn't want to be happening to a pig, that they would probably pay to not happen if they knew about it, which is kind of a reductivist way of thinking about, right, poor animal welfare. That's a being in there. But it's still something that is preventing information, that is allowing producers to undercut rather large producers, allowing them to undercut small producers who are trying to do things potentially a more humane and sustainable way. So what a lot of the bills are trying to doing is addressing these externalities. And where the Save Our Bacon Act, if allowed to pass, might be allowed additional externalities to kind of sweep under the rug. So on the note of externalities, right, we have poor animal welfare. A lot of consumers don't want it. The animals themselves are kind of obviously deeply harmed. Something that has also been written about is that Save Our Bacon wouldn't just pass humane protection, wouldn't just overturn past humane protection laws. It could also overturn any protection that a state has regulating the sale of livestock or their products. This could include product that one state deems safe and another state deems unsafe. This could include livestock being infected with a parasite that another state doesn't want to move across their own state lines, like we have with New Mexico and screwworm, which is a potential parasite. So my next question for you, and my last one before kicking it over with some fantastic audience questions, is for some of the staffers and senators and Congress people, and even influencers you're talking to, are there people for whom the humane protection isn't as salient, but they're talking about health, or they're talking about not wanting the federal government to kind of come in and overturn all sorts of other state laws that they might have around more anthropocentric issues like our health or our ability to appreciate wildlife who might get infected with a parasite?
The bad thing about factory farming is also the good thing about it is that no matter what issue you care about, you probably don't think factory farming is a good thing. It's the same thing with Save Our Bacon. Exactly right. More than 600 laws would be reversed in the United States that deal with food safety, that deal with zoonotic diseases like swine flu, avian flu, all types of diseases to cattle, including diseases that could lead to mad cow disease. And it's all to create what the industry wants is a race to the bottom where there are no standards and no rules. And there are numerous instances of Congress members and senators speaking out against Save Our Bacon for those very reasons. And just as you said, Matthew, of like what is going on with the screwworm, which, by the way, ironically, there are laws to prevent import of cattle with screwworm issues that they would be wiped out in the middle of this potential horrible pandemic that it could occur via the screwworm. And there are numerous problems when it comes to issues such as avian influenza that, as folks probably remember, that about 40% of the egg industry was just wiped out because of avian flu about a year and a half ago. And those avian flu laws to prevent the spread of the disease will be wiped out as well. So it's almost like these horrible things are happening in animal agriculture. There are laws to at least slow it down. All the while, the pork industry is trying to push something that will speed up all those problems. And yes, there are legislators in, especially in ag states, who are on our side, maybe a little bit for the animals reason, but also because they're like, wait a second, I don't want our farmers being decimated by zoonotic disease and as they view pests coming into our state because all of a sudden the protections are just wiped out because the pork industry happened to not like a certain vote that occurred in a state. That is absolutely true. And I can tell you that is also a real problem when it comes to setting a non-standard in a country that is assuming if one producer in one state does anything to their animals, no matter how morally reprehensible or how horribly unsafe, every state will be forced to have to allow it. And so we all know how bad factory farming has become and the myriad issues that it causes that are negative. Picture a world where there are literally no rules and that any industrial producer can do whatever they want with no repercussions, and then every state has to be forced to accept the products. That is the dystopia that Save Our Bacon is forcing our country towards if it passes. And that is, yes, to your question, Matthew, a major reason why there's so much bipartisan support who's really pushing this. In fact, really, when it comes down to it, it's really the Iowa representatives that are pushing this and the House Ag Committee chair, G.T. Thompson, who happens to have a philosophical belief of no rules when it comes to animal agriculture.
Really appreciate that, the thoroughness and examples in that response. I now want to turn over to audience questions, and we have kind of a semi-audience question. Adeline Manelli, who is the Food Impact Program's senior fellow, wanted to know a little bit more about the specifics of this. I'm just going to read her question to make sure that I don't lose anything in the paraphrasing of this, which I intend to. But Adeline asks, the bill's language seems to be designed to sweep in outright product bans framed as production standards set to zero, which puts existing measures like New York's foie gras ban um, already in state preemption litigation in a federal zone too. If passed, do you know if there's legal ground for defending these bans? Cities already operate within constrained legal authority, which is part of why local governments have leaned on procurement. What does Save Our Bacon mean for that landscape? And which municipal tools stay viable in the first place, like procurement, disclosure, licensing? And where do you still see room for meaningful action? And just to kind of editorialize on this question a little bit, like this is a very vague um, passage, right?
Yeah.
And so, what counts as interstate commerce of livestock and products, I think, becomes very contentious, which might be part of your answer. But I would like to just know about how you kind of reflect on this.
Adeline, I appreciate your question, and you are spot on. The pork industry is, of course, obsessed with its own industry, but it also believes there should be no rules at all on agriculture because they do not want a trickle out effect as if, hey, this industry is being regulated and it's going to somehow affect us one day. In fact, years ago in 2011, we had a federal agreement with the US egg industry to move away from barren battery cages, to end forced molting, to ensure that all cartons with eggs from caged chickens said eggs from caged chickens on the cartons. The egg industry supported it. It was the pork industry that opposed it and killed it because they don't want any rules for any type of agricultural system, including, to your question, foie gras, shark fin, horse meat bans, you name the procurement law that would be wiped out as long as it comes from animal products. Now, we were successful during this battle to get the cage-free egg laws saved. So that egg provision of Save Our Bacon has been removed because of our efforts. And so the cage-free egg laws have been saved. That is good. But all the other laws, they are on the chopping block if Save Our Bacon passes. In fact, you asked such a great question, like what could states or cities resort to? And I don't know. They could still ban production in a state, but when it comes to the sale of products, this would be a law that would prevent any type of sales standard. In fact, there's a lot of concern in New York about its good food purchasing program that there are rules when it comes to a good food purchasing program that it has that deals with numerous issues, animal welfare, greenhouse gas emissions, the treatment of workers, and numerous other important issues when it comes to food. Guess what? That's a food standard. That likely would be overturned too. And no states could even have a purchasing program because program is a synonym to having some type of rule when it comes to procurement. So it is worded vaguely for a reason to try to hit as much as possible to not only wipe out what exists now, but to prevent anything new in the future. And that's why this is the biggest threat in my mind, the treatment of animals since the advent of factory farming. And folks who care about animals and all the other issues when it comes to food justice and food equality, we have to come together to fight this thing to make sure it does not pass and set our country backwards literally decades.
Um, yeah, so it sounds like the vagueness of this is really the issue at heart. That anytime one state or interest group like the cage-free producers get a carve out. And I remember at one point that there might have even been a carve out for some of the state laws that were already passed, but that the act might be phrased in a way that could prevent any state from passing a future law. But in each one of these versions, there's always this ambiguity. And I would recommend, by the way, that folks read um, uh, was it prop I don't I think it was proposition, or what was the name of it, the passage in the House of Representatives Farm Bill, section 12008.
Hmm.
Go ahead and read that, and it's like one paragraph. So I'd recommend, as an exercise, reflect on what would that still allow for and what would that ban? And I think the answer that you're going to find is that within one paragraph, there's a lot of vagueness and openness to interpretation that make the ambiguity of that section a real big, like the Save Our Bacon section of the House Farm Bill, a real big issue for probably the courts to settle. Um, and in that would potentially leave the door wide open or shut for all sorts of things to transpire around livestock, meat products, etc. So I think on that note, it's probably really hard to answer which industries and products and um, laws would specifically be affected, because I think we're going to find out the answer in years to come. But the answer of which ones definitely will and definitely won't be affected is just wide open,
Hmm.
and probably more open than closed.
Yeah. So you're right, is that it's animal agribusiness is imagination how far it wants to go, which is as far as possible. So you're 100% right. I cannot agree with you more. The specifics and what for sure would be overturned has to do with animal welfare rules. That would be for sure overturned. Beyond that, yes, there is a whole spectrum of what else could be overturned, which it all leads to bad things, at least my view of how the food system I hope to get shaped will be.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I'm not sure. I'm going to push back a little bit, because I'm not sure it would be definitely welfare and not sure everything else. Because my recollection of Section 12006 is that it has no welfare specific language. It has states would um, not be able to prohibit the free movement of livestock derived products in interstate commerce. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I really do think the door is much more wide open. Um,
Oh, I agree. 100%. 100%. The question is how wide the door is.
yeah,
I mean, as for in my mind, it's the widest door our country has ever had in its history. And then the question is what imagination could happen for producers to add things to their look, I'll give an example, Matthew.
yeah.
What happens if there's some chemicals that are given to chickens to grow even more obese, or what toxins are given to pigs so they can cram them even tighter packed that we haven't even thought of yet, because there's some type of rules, at least for now, that kind of deters this type of behaviors. And then when there's a no rule situation, these things start happening and states are like, wait a second, this is crazy, I don't want this coming being sold in our state. That's the type of imagination that I don't know yet what will happen in the future, that Save Our Bacon likely opens the door for. And I think there'll be a lot of regret in all states. I don't care if it's a purple, a red, or a blue state. I think there's going to be a lot of regret if this occurs. And legislators can't protect their citizens from products they actually do not want their citizens to consume.
Got it. So, yeah, an inability for states to do anything with meat or livestock or animal products beyond what the federal government is willing to do. Um, I think that that presents a big concern and really does not describe the legislative landscape for states regulating food, livestock, and agricultural products at all in the current legislative environment. There's all sorts of things we do around the trade and consumption of these animals and products. So uh, I'm going to get to a few more questions now, and they're continuing to ask the question of, how can I get involved, who can get involved, et
Well, I
cetera,
appreciate that. Thank you.
which is great. And I'm sure that Josh has resources to share at the very end of this. I did just want to mention that Shanti Ayer did mention the Humane League and Compassion in World Farming as also having efforts that you can look up and sign up for. Um, and I think that's fantastic. Josh, of course, these are organizations that you know and collaborate with as well. So just wanted to give a special shout out to that when you go to share your kind of call for action towards the end. For now, I kind of want to focus a little bit more on, um, what who is going to be affected by this and how. And let's dial back a little bit to the issue of consumer prices. So, will this make things cheaper for consumers? That is another way of phrasing it might be, have the Massachusetts and California legislation that have banned the sale of goods produced from cages in other states, have those increased prices? What can you say about, what you thought might happen when you were advocating for the bills in California, and what has actually happened to prices, and how might we think about these? Because higher prices could be a good thing if it means that the producers who are doing things more humanely are getting kind of the right incentive and seeing those market signals. Higher prices might also be a bad thing if, especially the lower income consumers, are feeling particularly squeezed, don't have immediate access to like a vegetarian or a vegan diet or some of the goods that come from that, and have been counting on, a weekly shopping habit of buying eggs for their, kids' breakfast or whatever else. So I would love to hear your reflections both before and after on the price situation.
First of all, I'm super thrilled about Compassion in World Farming and Humane League's work on this, and huge props to so many folks in New York City who were really responsible raising the spotlight of this issue to Senator Schumer, which is a major reason why he put out the statement that he did. So yes, huge props to those groups. Huge thanks to so many organizations across the country who are making this a priority to battle. Now, to your question, the rate of increase on pork in those states has gone up slower than the increase of other animal products that have gone up because of inflation, like chicken. And so what we have found is that it actually doesn't cost all that much more money at all to allow an animal at least to turn around, at least to be free from cages. In fact, when I was leading the Prop 12 initiative, I would talk about it how it's called the McDonald's initiative in a way, because McDonald's has switched all of its eggs to cage free, 100% of the eggs, 2 billion eggs in total, 100% are cage free. McDonald's, all of its pork come from pigs who are released out of gestation crates for the vast majority of their pregnancy. No one would confuse McDonald's of some high-end retailer. And most fast food chains now have followed McDonald's to switch to cage-free eggs and move away from gestation crates. So what really happened is that grocers, when they market eggs from cage-free chickens, they market it up at a higher price than they should because they know that customers who buy that have an extra heart to try to probably do better and say take advantage of it. However, in states where it's a law, the prices barely go up at all. And at the end of the day, during California's ballot measure Prop 12 and in Massachusetts' nearly identical ballot measure 2 years earlier, the entire argument agribusiness gave is the price of eggs and pork is going to go up. The price of eggs and pork is going to go up. Voters heard it. All the voters heard it. They had a lot of opposition, a lot of resources to spread the message, and voters still overwhelmingly voted in favor of Prop 12. And in Massachusetts, it was called Question 3, and it passed with 78% of the vote. My point is this, is that voters knew what the potential outcome could be on price, and they still said abusing animals is not worth it. And what the outcome turned out to be is that the prices didn't go up all that much to begin with. And voters from the beginning were like, listen, pork industry, no matter what you say the price is going to go up, we do not want pigs tortured for our bacon. And that is why animal advocates have won literally every single ballot measure that we have waged. 100% of them in Florida, Arizona, California twice, Massachusetts. In spite of the fact of opposition talking about prices, voter says, don't give me the price argument when I'm looking at images of animals being tortured. So that's how we win. And the opposition, frankly, does not win when it comes to the price argument. They've never had since 2002, and I can't imagine a year that they ever do in the future. People simply do not want animals to be tortured.
What's interesting is that you're presenting this within the context of ballot initiatives, and that voting citizens on those ballot initiatives there's not really convincing evidence that they're being swayed by inflation concerns. I'm betting that it's a very different equation when the corporations talk to staffers and senators and legislators, because I'm sure the legislators themselves are very hesitant about introducing anything that could potentially lead to inflation, considering the economy is always a central issue in any campaigning. So I think it's another area where, you know, uh, not even necessarily through direct corporate influence peddling. Um, we see a lot of areas where legislators are disconnected from the immediate concerns of their voters, which is a great segue to reaching out a little bit more. We're going to have one more question I think Jeff actually wanted to hop on and ask this one. And then afterwards, perhaps we'll move to the general questions about how folks can get involved, pathways that they want. I'm sure you have resources, and we'd love to hear more of that. For now, Jeff.
Great. I do have a question. And then I actually also saw a great one from our researcher, Devin, come in. So we might read that one too, and then move on to the final stuff. So Josh, I was curious if you could talk in a little bit more detail about the really interesting political dynamics and coalitions that exist in this issue. I remember when court battles about Prop 12 were working their way up to the Supreme Court, there were a lot of interesting analyses about how judges would rule and then also how legislators would position themselves and how the public would react, because it is a confusing kind of issue. On the one hand, if you are in support of stuff like Prop 12, that is states' rights, but anti-business, or at least this is how it can be framed, right? And so it takes these different issues where, for example, conservatives would generally be in favor of states' rights, but then pro-business, and it kind of puts them in opposition to each other. It then also touches on these further issues like how we feel about meat in our society, how we feel about consumer rights in our society, animal welfare, which is relatively speaking nonpartisan, and then public health and the environment. And so you just find kind of interesting partnerships or interesting oppositions. And so I was just wondering if you could say a little bit about your analysis of this political situation and how that has affected your own thinking about who to be talking to and how to be talking to them.
You are 100% right, Jeff, that there has been a really unique bipartisan dynamic going on to oppose Save Our Bacon. I'm talking about in the thought sphere. We have everyone from Laura Ingraham and Tommy Lauren from Fox News agreeing with Ezra Klein and Nicholas Kristof. I don't know when those four agreed on anything, yet they agree Save Our Bacon is terrible and the treatment of animals is horrific, and those cages should be eliminated, by the way, as all four would say. In terms of the actual legislators themselves, more Republicans have signed letters against Save Our Bacon than Republicans who've signed as co-sponsors of Save Our Bacon. And so even in the Republican Party, where this historically has come from, they can't even get more folks to support it than oppose it, at least in written letters and signing your name to different objects in the House. In the Senate side, there's only 7 Republicans who support it. That is nothing when it comes to some big federal legislation that's trying to be pushed. And a major reason why is this, Jeff? It's for a lot of the arguments that you laid out. One, there are many Republicans who simply care about the treatment of animals. They oppose animals being confined in cages where they can't turn around. A lot of these Republicans are in states that this practice is already banned and that the ballot measures that ban them passed overwhelmingly, meaning their constituents voted for it. The Republican Party in Florida has been the best state for us. Is it a coincidence that Florida banned gestation crates in 2002? We have heard so many Republicans in Florida saying, wait a second, this practice has been banned 24 years ago. Why are we still talking about this? And why is some Republicans in Iowa trying to tell us in Florida, like, hey, we like it when there's no standards at all? And we're like, what are you talking about? This does not comport with ordinary American sentiment when it comes to animal welfare, whether you're conservative, moderate, or liberal. Other arguments beyond animal welfare that's been helpful, number two has to be states' rights, is that there are Republicans who are very consistent on states' rights, including, by the way, folks like Clarence Thomas, who was a strong voice during the Supreme Court case, who obviously is conservative and said, wait a second, states should have the right to do such a thing. On the legislative side, folks like Anna Polina Luna, Nancy Mace, these are very conservative MAGA officials, as they would say themselves, and said, wait a second, we believe in states' rights. We should not wipe them away just because some interest group simply does not like what one state has done. Other Republicans who've been on our side are on our side because pork producers in their state and their district have already moved away from crates. And they're like, wait a second, my pork industry constituents, including family farmers, don't use this practice, and they're going to be harmed if these laws get overturned. So for economic reasons alone, many of these Republicans are like, listen, this does not make sense to go backwards on that either. And I would say, and also even a more general sentiment about national security, this is an issue because there is no sector or entire economy, not just our food economy, Jeff, but our entire economy, that a foreign actor has more so taken over a sector, as in the pork industry. And so there are a lot of legislators on both sides of the political spectrum that don't like the idea of our pork industry 26% being owned by non-American interests. And they don't want to pass legislation that would make it even worse in their mind. So yes, there are many issues why folks have come on to be on our side, and those are just some of them.
Excellent. Great. I'm going to go ahead and read our researcher Devin's question as well, which is related to this topic. Is there a possibility that if passed, this federal preemption could one day backfire on industrial animal producers by federally centralizing farm animal welfare regulation and dismantling the states' rights defense? Say, if by some miracle, a future animal welfare friendly Congress decided to create stricter federal livestock welfare standards. Now, Josh, before you answer, I want to add a little bit of a twist to the question, which is there similarly a risk that your attempt to defeat this could backfire on you if those circumstances end up coming to pass? And more generally, how do you think about how these conversations interact with broader questions about the balance of power between federal and states, not only with respect to possible laws and policies about food systems, but also with respect to future laws and policies about other issues we care about, touching animal welfare, public health, the environment, workers' rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think about these kind of broader precedents and implications and balancing acts when thinking about how to position yourself on this specific occasion?
Devin, I appreciate the question. It is so funny you bring this up because the pork industry, their argument is we can't have a patchwork of state laws. That makes it too hard to be able to produce pork to sell to California. And then what do we do for other states? Which, by the way, the California law was passed in 2018, has been in place for years on end. And the suppliers, they've adapted. They're selling pork to California. But that begs the question to what you're asking, Devin. If you don't want a patchwork of state laws, great. You want a national standard instead? Fine. You want a national crate-free standard? I'm good with that. And so that is one argument that actually shows the true intent of the pork industry to not have one standard, which is their fake argument. Their intent is to have a race to the bottom and go as far down as possible. And there's a stark difference between the two. And so I would love to have a Congress in the future where we say, listen, let's find common ground with the pork industry. They want one national standard as they claim. Great. Well, how about we find common ground and make that standard a standard that comports with ordinary Americans' view of animal sentiment? And that means not confining an animal in a cage so small that you can't even turn around. So, yes, logically, I think that argument makes a whole lot of sense. And I would hope there is a future Congress one day that would take animal welfare more seriously. I will just say the reason why I just am a bit skeptical is because there has been virtually no laws on a national scale that has benefited farm animals. Yes, there are the organic standards, so to speak, that for organic operations, animals have to be given some type of outdoor access. That's good for animals raised in organic operations. There's also the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act that passed during the Eisenhower administration that, at least for some animals who are killed for food, they should be rendered unconscious. Beyond that, there has been not virtually nothing, there has been literally nothing. And the only movement that there really has been is to try to go backwards. So I would love to live in that world, Devin, where Congress is more animal friendly. We can pass something more favorable for the animals. In the meantime, what we have seen is that states have been the laboratory of democracy, as they should be in the United States. And it's states that have pushed the issues forward, at least the issues that I have cared about. The issues like animal welfare, it's the states that have built the momentum as Congress stalls or goes backwards. And by the way, we are not set up to necessarily succeed in Congress because farm animal laws typically inherently would start in the ag committees. And the ag committees are typically made up of legislators that represent big industrial districts and states in animal agriculture, who are the last people to ever want to support this type of forward progress. So we're starting from a real challenging base in Congress. Forget about the entirety of Congress. Just where a bill would start is already challenging, even in the best of Congresses. So in my view, we need states to be the democracy to move things forward on the issues of making the food system more humane, safer, more sustainable.
All right. Thanks for answering Jeff's and a couple more of our audience questions. Really appreciate that. And now, which I think, based on the number of questions, acts as kind of a piece de la resistance, like a call to action. So how do folks get involved? What resources do you have to share? What types of people can get involved? So we had a question about students. We have a person logging in from Ohio. Who are the people that matter most? Where are they? And how do we draw those connections? I just want to mention we have about 5 minutes left in the seminar. So any kind of you have a little bit of breathing room around sharing this information, and then we'll have 1 more minute to wrap up.
Thank you, everybody who have asked this question. And it really goes to show that you don't want to just hear about something, you want to do something about it. So thank you very, very much. Here's what I can ask everybody to do as long as you're watching in the United States. That is, please call your Senate offices. And anyone can do it. And all you have to do, it's everyone watching, I'm sure you can find their phone numbers. Just go to just look up it says go to Google, look up your Congress member. And then it goes to a congressional website, you plug in your zip code, it will give the phone numbers for your senators and your House member. All you have to do is call the number up and say, hey, I'm Matthew Hayek, I'm Jeff Seabill, I'm Josh Balk. Here's my address to demonstrate I'm a constituent. The big issue of concern for me is Save Our Bacon, and I'm respectfully requesting Senator so-and-so to oppose any farm bill that has Save Our Bacon in it. That's the ask. And if everyone can do that, I'm telling you, it makes a difference. And I'm going to give it a quick example, the few minutes I have left, Matthew, is that I have been in Senate offices numerous times where I have met with the senator and the ag staffer sitting next to her or him, who the senator was. And the senator has said, look to the staff and say, hey, we got calls on this issue. And the staff both times the staffer says, we are flooded with calls. And then I personally, because I know what the answer is going to be, jump in and say, hey, just out of curiosity, what's the percentage like? Is it like half and half? Some want savor bacon, some don't. And then the answer for every time I've asked is no. Oh my gosh. It's 100% of the calls are coming in against Savor Bacon. In fact, one office I was in, the staff member said, wait a second, I think one person one time did call in favor of it. Like he had to search his mind for that one call that came in favor of Savor Bacon, but beyond that, all were against it. That matters. It truly does because the pork industry only has a hold of certain congressional members. But outside the big pork districts and states, senators and House members truly want to know where their constituents are. So please, I'm telling you firsthand account, these phone calls make a difference. So please, I ask everyone, call your offices. They're very nice to answer the phone. They're very polite. They truly will take down your name, number, and your request for the senator or House member. And ask if you can ask your friends and family to do the same. That is literally the only thing you do. That would be absolutely massive on this campaign.
Thanks so much for that, Josh. So with that, really want to thank you for coming, visiting our program virtually, speaking to some very engaged audience members. Yeah, we're just very appreciative that you came to talk to us about all the complexities associated with this and all the ramifications that are influencing your decision to go out there and be very proactive about this. Hopefully, this also informs a much broader and wider conversation that Jeff mentioned in the beginning about, how we think about pathways to more sustainable and humane food systems much more broadly. And I think you just gave us so much to chew on. So thanks so much for that, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me.
And with that, I just want to mention a couple other things before we log off. For people who are interested in that wider conversation, please go to foodimpact.org, our program's website, where you can sign up for a mailing list to be privy to all sorts of conversations and events about how you can be more involved and engage with intellectual debates and advocacy around food system reform. With that, I also want to thank Hound for helping facilitate and coordinate this event, a valuable staff and administrator and coordinator for our program. And what am I still missing? That's really it. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. Thanks, Jeff, for sharing the emceeing with me, and for all of you who attended. And have a great lunch and rest of your day or weekend, wherever you are.
Thanks so much, Josh, Matthew, everybody.